Hi everyone, and welcome to My Geek Review. I'm CK Burch, sometimes novelist, mostly internet blogger, and funny person. And I'm here to you today to talk about a game that I needed to crack open some beer in order to lubricate my senses and loosen my tongue slightly to talk about. Yes, if you have read the title of the review, we're going to be talking about Tomb Raider, the 2013 reboot of the Eidos franchise, starring one of the most iconic characters in computer gaming history, regardless of whether or not they are a male or a female. Lara Croft is one of those characters that ever since her inception into the video gaming community back in 1996 is one of those where you instantly recognize her. You know who she is, you know what she does, and you know what Tomb Raider games are. From the 2001 and 2003 films starring Angelina Jolie, all the way to numerous other media, comic books, video games, right, you know? But, look, the point of... Tomb Raider 2013 is easily, by far, one of the fucking worst games I have ever played in my entire life. It has nothing to do with control, graphics, playability. It has everything to do with presentation, implementation, and execution. That makes this one of the absolute worst games I have ever played. Now, I have notes. Just pages of notes, because I sat there playing this game absolutely aghast, shocked, and almost awed at what was going on in front of me. So I'm going to, unlike most of my Geek reviews, in which I just kind of ramble on for like half an hour at a time, I'm going to keep myself at a decent pace today and keep myself on track. And I'm going to stay well inebriated because this game kind of drove me to drink. So let us begin. Well, what is Tomb Raider? Tomb Raider is a series of video games in which our main character, Lara Croft, goes on an archaeological expedition of some kind, usually with a lot of fortune hunting / chasing and mercenary work involved, and some sort of mythological civilization or another is unearthed. It's very much, simultaneously, it is Indiana Jones starring a woman, and yet at the same time, it is so much more than that. It has inspired other video games, including even the Indiana Jones franchise. After Tomb Raider came out, we got the release of Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine for PC and N64, which saw the man with the hat step into the 3D realm for the first time ever. So, you know, if going from there, looking at all the other knockoffs, and then all the way up to the Uncharted franchise, which in and of itself took the series and the genre of action-adventure games and pushed it into a different category altogether, utilizing more cover-based mechanics and more of a distinct lean towards action versus the exploration aspects. You know, Tomb Raider has left its mark for good reason. Now, when I stepped into this game, there were a few things that I was expecting, and there were quite a few things that I was not expecting. So why don't we start, by the way, spoilers fully on for everything, by the way. So let's start by talking about what did I like about this game. Well, to start off, what I liked about this game is, quite simply, it is absolutely breathtakingly gorgeous. The graphics are absurd. Even on regular settings, just like average default hardware mode settings, the game is absolutely gorgeous. There's so much work that went into the realism of the environments, into the settings, into the way the character models look, into how the environment looks, particle effects. There is this wonderful effect that was almost kind of distracting, but was really, really cool. That had anytime Lara was in or near water, there were like little drops of water that were forming on the screen, and they were like sliding down, very much so. And I kept wanting to wipe off my computer screen because they looked that realistic, and very, very, very cool. Responsive controls in a very similar scheme to Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb. You got the WASD controls to move you, and you can use a mouse. But one of the things that when it comes to adventure games of this ilk, and Tomb Raider is among the offenders in this category for having controls that don't age well, I was absolutely happy with how well the controls responded. I felt like I could go in any direction. I felt like I could jump anywhere. I felt like I could move when I needed to move, and I was doing so with ease, confidence, and response. At times, the controls can be sluggish, especially in some of the jumping, in some of the cinematic moments where you need to jump, or as things are collapsing about you and you need to keep going. But aside from that, the controls are spot on, and I really truly appreciated that. There's an upgrade system where you gain experience as you go through the game. As you get more points, you can upgrade both Lara and your weaponry, and it feels rewarding and it feels very empowering to go from not having anything and being slightly unable to cope with your surroundings to really feeling like a true survivalist by the end of the game. And every time you get these power-ups and rewards, it definitely, you feel it. You feel like it's worth your while to get that experience. While, and I will discuss this, towards the beginning of the game, Lara's transformation psychologically from bystander to survivalist is very harsh and jarring. By the end, it really does feel like an actual, literal transformation. Because by the time I got to the end of the game, I was really surprised at how much more confidence I had as a player in what I was doing, and it literally step for step matched what was going on with Lara, and that is something very rare that I have not really felt in very many games. Because usually games, they drop you in the middle of something and you're like, okay, I am now playing this character, I need to quickly figure out how they control and what they do and stuff like that. But as Lara, you're really literally thrown into a situation where you're learning how to deal with it as she does, and so by the end of the game, you really feel like you've gone along with her, and that is a very rare experience. And you know, by the end, it really did feel like they did that very well. Climbing and exploring. Another thing that can be notoriously difficult when it comes to adventure games. Executed so very well here. There's a climbing mechanic in which you have a pickaxe that you can use to climb up specific walls. Jumping and latching onto platforms felt very easy. Even though, like, sometimes when I was in the more elevated portions of the game, I did get a little nervous. I never felt unconfident in my ability to make jumps, in my ability to climb, and that's a great feeling. Climbing and exploring this island feels good. It feels right. It feels great. That is what I liked about this game. Now the cons to this game are basically everything else. Everything involving this video game experience falls in the list of cons for me. And the reason for that is primarily because the game is called Tomb Raider, and this game does not feel like Tomb Raider. This game does not feel like an adventure game. This game does not feel like this is one of Lara Croft's adventures. And while I understand that they were going for a darker, grittier reboot a la Batman Begins, The game is brutal. It is mean-spirited. It is misogynistic. It disempowers the female character, who is one of the most iconically empowered female characters, and it even takes the tomb rating out of the Tomb Raider. This shouldn't have been called Tomb Raider. There is a number of tombs throughout the experience, throughout your explorations of the island, that you can in fact go and explore and hunt for treasure. However, all of these, except for one, all happen outside the main narrative. So they're completely optional. There is only one tomb that you actually have to go through. And when you do get to this tomb, there is a moment where Lara, like, shudders and brushes herself off and literally says, "I hate tombs." Now, being amongst the Star Trek fandom, as I am, I oftentimes have heard people say, "Oh, this doesn't feel like oh, this isn't Star Trek." No, 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 no. I was like, well, we're going in a different direction. No, 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 no. And I've been a bit of an apologist on the other end of things. And, for me, a lot of times when a series or franchise goes in that opposite direction, in a different direction, I can see what they're trying to do and I can understand it. For those of you who have seen my Man of Steel review, you'll understand that I really did not like the direction that they took with Man of Steel. They made it dark, they made it gritty, they made it cynical, they made it awful, and it was a terrible, terrible, terrible choice. It was a brutal, unrelenting movie that, while flashy, dashy, and entertaining in that regard, it was just harsh and mean, and so too is Tomb Raider. Now, the thing with Tomb Raider is that it starts off with a brief cinematic showing us Lara Croft in her quarters on a ship with a brief narration. The ship then is rocked by a storm. She barely escapes. She washes up on shore. She finds her companions who are also on the ship, and then she's immediately knocked unconscious. And then when she wakes up, she is strung upside down in some kind of like ritual chamber of some sort. She has to swing, you the player, you have to swing her back and forth until she burns through her bonds. She falls to the ground, is impaled through the side by a piece of rebar, gets up, escapes this collapsing area while this guy, one of the island inhabitants, is trying to grab onto her and pull her back. She has to kick him off. Then to the next sequence, once you get there, she starts to see her friends and companions being shot and burned to death, and in a quick time event, you then have to fend off one of the island inhabitants and prevent him from raping Lara so that she can then roll over and shoot him point blank in the head. This is the main theme of the game, is that they have landed on a very bad place where very bad things happen, and very bad things continually happen to Lara Croft. This is like a Lemony Snicket novel if you took out any and all sense of good humor. And Lara is continually beaten, falls from great heights, is continually forced to horrific sights, it is just absolutely mean-spirited. And the jarringness of the opening, especially, is when you take that into consideration, if you don't know anything about Lara, you don't know what she's doing on the ship, you don't know why she's there. You just know that she's on the ship. You know that she said something along the lines of, I didn't go looking for an adventure, but adventure found me, and then boom, we're off to the races, and then she's getting the shit kicked out of her, and it is, in a way, meant to evoke sympathy for the main character because, well, she's in pain, so we should feel sympathy for that, right? But it doesn't work that way. Not only does she literally get the shit kicked out of her. Okay, maybe not literally shit kicked out of her, but there are multiple scenes where, like, she's getting kicked. She's falling from great heights. She gets impaled. She gets hurt. She has to cauterize a wound with a heated up arrowhead. She gets knocked to the ground by a group of men and gets punched in the face repeatedly. She is continually just constantly fighting people off, getting beat up, getting hurt, there's so much violence towards this woman. And in an action game you're expecting violence. But in an action adventure game, you're not normally expecting to see characters brutalized in such a manner. That, to be truthful, I was shocked by it. And I was shocked by the decision to make the opening of the game, in which we are supposed to get to know our main character, be essentially one long series of brutalities, including, and yes, it is an attempted rape, to gain sympathy for our main character. That's not how that works. You do not automatically gain sympathy or empathy for a character in a video game simply because they are getting the shit kicked out of them. You just want whoever is doing it to stop. It doesn't make me care about the character anymore. It doesn't make me want to embrace her or anything like that. I just want it to stop, because it's a continual onslaught towards a human being, and that needs to stop. Which brings me to the next point. The storytelling is very vague and very lazy. Beginning with that opening sequence in which we literally spend no time with Lara before she's thrown into the midst of shit-kicking. The next actual bit of storytelling we're getting, or any insight into Lara or her companions, happens upon she comes to a campfire. That's your series of save points. Your waypoints are campfires, and you can sit and rest and be okay. But she comes to it, and she pulls out a camcorder, a video camera, and she watches old bits of the tape that her friend Samantha had been recording. Now this gets used twice as a video camera, and then it gets used multiple times in journals that you find spread throughout the island. The story is told from flashbacks. The perspectives of people in the past are what give you your story and your insights into the characters. Everything is told in narration. Nothing is told to you in the moment. Nothing pertinent. Certainly fetch quests are given to you, and there is a little bit of explanation as far as to what is actually going on in the island, which you would think is the main driving thing, what is going on, how do we get out of here, and then eventually what is this supernatural aspect of this island. And there is a huge supernatural aspect to it, but it's all very lazily gone into by thrusting you into the midst of awful shit, and then going back and going, oh, look how it wasn't awful, and then going, well, if you want to really dive into the story here, find all of these different journals. And it's weird because literally everyone journals. Everyone. Every fucking character in this game journals. Even the stupid fucking supporting cast, who are two-dimensional as fuck and are given, literally no, they're given personalities, but we're not given any insight into those personalities. We're not really allowed to spend any sort of time with them, because all of their thoughts are located in journals that you find throughout the island. For example, there are two characters, Reyes and Roth. Captain Roth is essentially Lara Croft's mentor in this game, and Reyes is one of the crew of the Endurance, that the ship that Lara was on when they crashed. Now, there is a brief moment where, in Samantha's video blogging, she happens to catch Reyes and Roth, in an intimate moment, and they look up, and she quickly pans away. And that would have been, and that would have been it. That would have been it. That was all we needed to know that the two of them were intimate. And so, in that, okay, great, I'm glad I got that little tidbit. Could you have not told me that in a flashback? Could you have maybe given me, an opening level where Lara gets to walk around the Endurance. She gets to interact with these people. We get to know these people. We get to see who they are, talk to them, understand who they are, understand what they're trying to do here, and then shit goes to pot. Now, the opening sequence probably wouldn't have been so jarring to me if we had had that opening instead. If we had gotten to know people, if we had gotten to see them, interact with them, understand them, I probably wouldn't have been so thrown by the brutality of the opening. The brutality still would have, like, taken me aback, but I at least would have had some sort of, like, feel for the characters when everything goes to shit. Unfortunately, everything goes to shit. We don't know shit about these people. Then we're told kind of about them. And then, not only that, but in one of the laziest bits of gameplay storytelling I've ever found, if you want more insight into their thoughts on what is happening and what they were thinking and what they're trying to do, you have to search the island and find their journals that are scattered about here and there in order to really, really understand these people. And by then, it's who gives a fuck at that point? Because, like, I'm trying to wrap my head around what is going on here, and while exploring is a big part of this video game, the narratives has such an urgent drive to it that it feels like stopping to explore and stopping to look around from a simple narrative point of view feels like you're abandoning your friends and allowing them to suffer while you go treasure hunting. Another problem that I have with the whole optional tombs to go tomb raiding thing is that, well, shit, everyone's getting burned, shot, tortured, killed. The island is full of murderers, and every second we stay here, the better chances we're all going to die. Let me go take a few minutes to go, like, check out some tomb that I happen to find here, and I'll go searching for treasure. Not just lazy, it's irresponsible. So, you know, like there are elements of the story that if I didn't specifically find these journals, I wouldn't have understood what was going on by the very end. Sure, they give you just barely enough information in the game itself and what is happening to tell you this, but I don't fucking know and or care about these people until I find these journals, and by that time, I've only interacted with them once or twice, and I still don't fucking care about them, because I'm too busy trying not to jump into another cinematic moment where my main character is either falling from a great height, or running away from getting beat up, or is getting beat up. It's lazy. It is awful storytelling because the thrust of it is on these cinematic moments and on the gameplay and the gunplay. It's terrible. I don't know. Sorry, it's just like I'm just quickly going through my notes so I don't like keep on boring everyone here because I can already feel people like, really. Alright, so aside from the fact that the surviving supporting cast is two-dimensional. Alright, there's another. Okay, here we go. So, here is something that okay, Lara Croft is defined by the men in the story and not by herself. Now, while Lara does make eventually a number of decisions to continue moving forward and to be a survivor, the bulk of what drives her in this story rests on all the men in the story. Now, this has to do with her absent father, who is either dead or missing or something. I don't know. Apparently by the end of the game, I found out that she resents her father, but I don't know why. I don't know who he is. I know that he was some type of adventurer. I inferred that because it's implied, and that's about it. But we're never told about her father. All we know is that he's a Croft. And so she resented her father for some reason. Roth, her mentor. He provides all of the wisdom and ability that she has in the game and teaches her. Like, she relies on his teaching. It very specifically says that she relies on his teaching for many of the gameplay aspects. Um, there is the character of Dr. Whitman. Whitman is an asshole archaeologist who happens to be not just an asshole, but a huge traitor in that he's all about himself. He's selfish, and you see this coming a mile away. It's not. It's like traitor is written across his forehead. He ends up hooking up with the island inhabitants for a strictly anthropological perspective, but he basically leaves everyone else behind and goes, "Yeah, I'm gonna hang out with these guys because then they won't kill me." She sees that turncoatedness and she, resolves to be more wary. Then there is the men in the story who sacrifice themselves. Okay, further adding towards Lara's guilt. I can't let anyone else die, and that presses her forward. That is even one of the reasons that she is pressed forward into trying to save some of the pilots that crash land on the island. One of the crew members is an old Scotchman named Grimm, who, in a moment of being captured by the islanders, he decides to fight them off rather than allow Lara to put her weapons down, and he ends up sacrificing himself so that she can go on. He dies. Roth saves Lara from an attack because one of his guns happens to, it runs out of ammo in one moment, and literally in the next moment it has ammo again, and he's able to start shooting people up. But between those two moments, he moves Lara out of the way specifically as an axe is thrown at her, and he takes it in the back and sacrifices himself for her, and he dies. Then we have the character of Alex, who has a massive crush on Lara and has decided to go and try and get tools from the wreckage of the ship to try and make himself look cool in Lara's eyes, which I learned from reading his journal entry that I found lying around. He sacrifices himself because he's trapped underneath a piece of debris and he can't get out, so he gives her the tools and tells her to go because he knows that they won't be able to get out if she doesn't. And so he too sacrifices himself so that she can continue on. Everything about Lara is determined, drafted, and defined by the men in this story. And even further insulting, it is defined by the deaths and the sacrificial guilt that Lara feels by the men in this story. Feminist Frequency did this great, and they're continuing to do a great series of videos on tropes versus women in video games. And I cannot remember the specific name of the particular trope, but there's one where the main character is driven by the death of the woman and or women in his life, and so that is what propels him forward. Now we have a reverse trope here, where Lara is defined not by her own actions or own ability to continue moving forward, but by the deaths of the men around her. The male-centricness of this video game is astonishing. The island is populated entirely by men. There is only one male character who makes it to the end of the story unscathed, and he is very obviously and clearly not a love interest in any way, shape, or form, thus both neutering that character and Lara's character at the same time. And I say this specifically because the male characters who are sacrificed, with the exception of Grimm, are both handsome, classically featured. It could be very well said in the reverse, in the opposite, where it's the beautiful women in this man's life are sacrificed, but the ones who would specifically not be love interests are spared. So now we've got Lara surrounded by men, defined by their deaths and or absence, and by their decisions and how they trained her and taught her and told her what to do and what equipment they gave her. And you've got a heroine who basically goes from point A to point B under the influence of men. And the only decisions that she really makes for herself are in the moment decisions to stay alive and to survive. Where's my independently iconic female action hero from the Tomb Raider franchise? I'm not seeing her. by the end of the game, yeah, I see her. But if the point of this reboot was to show us how Lara got to that point, there are better fucking ways to do it than by having her continually brutalized and to see all these people die around her and to be influenced by them specifically to get her to a particular point where she can be an independent force of nature in future games. Now, in the original canon, from what I understand and from what I know, Lara Croft survived weeks in the mountains in a plane crash, and that was what led her to her survival skills. And that would have made for a fantastic story. If you literally took every human being, every human enemy in this story, in this game, and removed them and made it a fight of Lara versus nature, and then start throwing in the supernatural elements, you would have had a fantastic game. It would have worked out so much better. You know, with the exception of the whole men sacrificing themselves for Lara, and she's driven by that, and blah, 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 blah. You would have had a fantastic game if it had literally been Lara versus nature, moving forward, here's how your survivor came to be. And actually, you know, raiding tombs. Maybe she was in the middle of an archaeological expedition and she got separated from her group and or party, and something happened and she had to communicate with them and she was forced to survive and like use her wits and shit like that. That would have been a fantastic game that would have made for a fantastic story, but instead we literally have a horror game masquerading as an adventure game. The game, besides being brutal, is unhealthily grim. It is so violent as to be absolutely distracting. The part in the video game that had me absolutely aghast and totally trying to figure out what it was that I'd just seen. My jaw was open for this sequence. There are these supernatural warriors called Oni. In Japanese, it's demon. And they kill these island inhabitants with aplomb. But then they leave literally piles of bodies. Like, and as you walk past them, you can knock over appendages and heads and watch them roll. And there's like entrails and there's like blood pooling everywhere. There's a scene where Lara, in order to try and get away from some enemies, she literally jumps into a river of blood and is surrounded by these appendages and whatnot, and severed heads and limbs and intestines floating all over the place. And as she is, after these enemies walk away, she slowly emerges from the blood in like that it's like an homage to, what was it, The Descent? And she comes up and she's literally bathed in blood. And my jaw was on the fucking floor. Because even outside of that, you are killing people with headshots, with bow and arrow. You get upgradable weapons to like literally tear people apart with a grenade launcher, with an assault rifle, with a shotgun. And then you got your pickaxe, so that you can go in for melee attacks and then go for finishers where you put the pickaxe at the top of their head and then like, drag them around, or you take your arrow and you like shove it up their chin, and it's bloody and it's visceral and it's violent and it is so over the top and mean-spirited that I couldn't figure out if they were trying. It was almost to the degree where it was like, where some games would make a statement like, hey, look how violent video games there are nowadays. Can you believe this shit? Let's make a statement on this. It went almost to that degree of exaggerated violence. It was unhealthy. It was just mean-spirited. And I'm all for some darkness and a little bit of violence in my adventure stories. I think Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is the best in the Indiana franchise. And it's a great story, and it does get really dark, and it does get pretty violent. But there's levity, there's action. This game just hits the brutal button and hammers down with full force. Like, I understood that Lara was trying to survive, but I felt no empathy for this character that was being just as brutally murderous as these island inhabitants around her. I could not feel empathy or sympathy for her at any point in this game because, one, I didn't know who she was or what the fuck anything meant to her. I didn't know her story. I still don't know her story. I don't get it. I know that she was part of an archaeological expedition to this island searching for the lost Japanese civilization of Yamatai. That's it. I don't know what her relationship to her father was. Maybe I just didn't find that journal. I overlooked it in my, I don't know, pressing concern for trying to save the day and get people off of this island or some bullshit like that. But I don't know anything about her. All I know is that she went from a wilting flower to a survivalist in a video game that is a terrifying mashup of Dead Space and Far Cry. And she got totally brutalized in the process. That's it. That's it. It's hard to care about someone who, in order to survive, has to be as big a sociopath as those who are around her. Oh, it just made me feel uncomfortable throughout the game because I didn't feel like I was playing an adventure game. I felt like I was playing a murder simulation. It was just over the top and awful. One last quick thing that I'll point out. Two last quick things. One that I'll glance over briefly, and then the other one that I'll spend a moment on, and then I'll go overall with what I've got here because I clearly need to be done. Number one, the way that they set up the story, it could not have actually happened. Because they go out of their way to talk about how any ships, planes, or otherwise who come within the vicinity of the island are knocked out by this supernatural storm that's created by the ghost of an ancient Japanese empress who is trapped here. So that being said, if any ship and any plane that come into the vicinity of the island, they get struck by lightning and they die and they blow up and people are washed on shore every now and again. Number one, how the hell are there so many people on this island? I mean waves. I'm not just talking about like a few here or there. There are hundreds of these guys. Absolutely hundreds of these guys. And there are no women, so there's no procreation because the women, I'm guessing, are sacrificed to this Himiko, who is the Sun Queen, to try and like appease her. Because I don't know. The story was very vague. It's something about an ascension ritual, something about burning these women to see if she will be the vessel for Himiko. It's very vague. I probably missed the journal about it, so whoops. But there's no women, so these people can't procreate. So I'm not really sure how there's so many hundreds of people who inhabit this island. And also, their technology, it's impossible. It is impossible for their technology to exist on this island. Now, they go out of their way to make pains to make these guys out to be scavengers, and then they use the technology that they've got around them to patch things together and create things. Yeah, but that doesn't explain the, like, hundreds of foot-high cranes and the gondola system that they've got and the electricity that they have all over the island, which they somehow got from a German expedition that came to this island in the 1940s. But how, if anybody who comes here, their ships are wrecked and their planes are down, how could they have gotten this much technology onto this island in any salvageable way in order to establish these massive bases, cranes, just like pulley systems? It's so intricate and detailed, and it's a marvel. It's a marvel to look at. And like, if you weren't thinking about it, it's just breathtaking how this game is in the way that it creates this patchwork quilt of technology for these island survivors. But none of it works. It is impossible for any of this to work because there would have been no way for them to get this on the island in the first place. And in the second place, they wouldn't have had the tools or the technology in order to establish these underground bunkers, overground bunkers, high-rise machinery. There's just no way it actually would have worked. The technology in this game is bullshit. And then, finally, my last beef with this game is that any sort of empowerment you get as a player is stripped away as some of the most climactic moments are QuickTime. I hate QuickTime. Like, I don't, a little bit of QuickTime, press this button, mash it down hard, okay, you've gotten yourself free. quick time as a gameplay mechanic is overused, and it just gets a massive middle finger from me because it feels like a massive middle finger from the developers saying, we don't really want you to play our game. We just want you to all of a sudden wiggle back and forth. Now all of a sudden press the E button. Now all of a sudden do this. And it's like, okay, there's no skill in quick time. There's no skill whatsoever. I don't get anything out of all of a sudden being put into a situation where you have to click, 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 jump, 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 wiggle, 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 wiggle. Hey, you got it. You got the timing right. Good job. You're good at timing. I don't get anything out of that. I get more out of like actually running, jumping, the shooting, and then the attacking and everything. But like most of the sequences in this game, especially the very end, you kill the main bad guy in a quick time sequence. So awful. It's like time slows down, time your thing right now. Click, 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 click. Quick time. There are so many instances of quick time, and if you fail, you die. And Lara dies a lot. She dies brutally. She gets like bamboo poles shoved through her head. She has men choke her to death. She has wolves bite and snap her neck. She's impaled in multiple different ways. She gets shot by arrows. She burns. And most of these are if you fail the quick time sequences. And it's just like, it neuters the gameplay. It neuters the player's experience, and it's awful. It's just so awful. The implementation, the design, so much thought clearly went into this game, but then at the same time, when they actually executed it, so many problems. So many problems. It's a terrible game from point one onward that doesn't actually take the time to make you care about these characters. You're just supposed to care because this is Lara Croft, right? Everyone knows who Lara Croft is, so there's that automatic bonding. When you go back and you look at a game, when you go back and you look at a film like Batman Begins to establish an origin, it takes its time to show you who Bruce Wayne is and why we are following him and why we need to care about him. That's what a good reboot does. This game does none of that. This game does not ask you to care about Lara Croft. It just tries to force you to care through brutalization, through pain and torture and violence. That's what it does. It doesn't make you care about the character. It makes you care that the character is being beaten the fuck up. And that is not how you create characterization. The storytelling is lazy and useless and ineffective because you don't actually care about the supporting cast at all unless you take the time to hunt down every single last journal and read what they're thinking about you and each other. The violence is ghastly and over the top. There are rivers of blood, there are severed limbs, there are severed heads. There's violence on a sociopathic level. It turns our main character into as brutal a murderer as the inhabitants of this island. And that did not make me care about her anymore, simply knowing that she's doing this to survive. It just made me feel uncomfortable. The game is essentially what you would do if you took an adventure game, stripped it of the adventure, added in multiple horror elements and survival elements. Now, if you want to play a good horror survival game, go play The Last of Us, because it takes all of everything that I said of the above and actually does it very well, because it makes you care about the characters. It allows you to spend time with the characters before the violence and the brutality come into play, and even though the violence and the brutality make you feel uncomfortable, it is set explicitly in a world where it's do or die. It's the apocalypse. That's what you're supposed to do. In Tomb Raider, Lara Croft, yeah, she can stealth her way around people, but this is no Metal Gear Solid where you can actually literally make it through the game without killing a single person. If you are going to survive in any way, shape, or form, there are sequences where you do have to take people out, and you have to take people out brutally. This is not Tomb Raider. This is not Tomb Raider. This is Dead Space meets Far Cry, starring an alternate universe version of Lara Croft, who unfortunately learns how to survive by becoming a brutal murderer. That's not the action hero that I want. That's not the independent, strong female character that we deserve. That is not the character that Lara Croft has ever been. And hopefully she will not continue this. I do have hope because there is a comic book series that is going to be coming out very soon. By very soon, I mean next year. And Gail Simone, one of the best comic book writers ever, who will be handling it. And not only does she write strong female characters very well, she writes good stories very well. So I am looking forward to actually picking that up, simply because I would like my Lara Croft fix, and I would like to read a good story along with that. However, in the meanwhile, hopefully, if anything good comes out of this game, it's the fact that Gail Simone is writing a Tomb Raider comic book. That's not saying much. I am intrigued by the prospect of a possible Tomb Raider sequel, a sequel to this game. But I am wary, now that I've played this game, of what that would actually mean. Because this game is terrible. I mean, is it gorgeous? Does it play well? Yeah, absolutely. Is combat visceral and entertaining and satisfying? Yes, absolutely. But then when you remember that you're Lara Croft, and you remember the brutality that's been done against her, and you feel and understand the depths of violence that is going on both sides, this isn't a Tomb Raider game. This is exactly like what they did with Man of Steel, where they put Superman on the screen and they made him a dark and cynical character. And they have put Lara Croft on the video game screen once again, and they've made her a dark and cynical character. Because that's apparently the way that you create sympathy for characters these days, by doing dark and gritty and putting them through the ringer. It worked for Batman, it doesn't work for everyone. That's my geek review of Tomb Raider. I'm going to go play Tomb Raider Underworld because that game is actually really good. And even though the controls can be a little shoddy at times, and there are a few flaws in the game. I'm not going to lie, it's not perfect. It's not fucking perfect in any way, shape, or form. But it is an actual true adventure, and it is very satisfying. And you get a very strong Lara Croft, an independent, strong female character who actually makes her own goddamn decisions on her own. Anyways, I'm going to leave a few links, one for Feminist Frequency, one for the announcement about Gail Simone, and one to some of my own writings if you're curious to see, like, hey, how would I actually do this? How would I write a strong female character, you ask? Well, let me tell you. I have a book. It's a science fiction book called Between Gods and Monsters, which features a female protagonist, and I'll link it to you down below. But I've taken up almost an hour of your time. I meant that I tried. I took notes to try and keep myself on point, and it just didn't work. I'm gonna get the fuck out of here. Yeah. Thank you for watching this. Don't buy Tomb Raider. Don't bother playing it. It's a shitty, awful, horrible, putrid, grim, mean-spirited fuck of a game, and it just hurts. Especially by the time you get to the end and you feel numb and senseless. And there's no thrill, there's no adventure, and there's only one tomb to raid, and it's already been raided by, by the Germans by the time you get there. That's it. That's it. So, anyways, I'll hopefully be doing more of these in the future. Yeah, there's a couple I wanted to do, but I've just been running out of time. But I made this a priority because of how awful this game was and how aghast I was at how awful this game was. So, take what you will. It's only just my opinion, but this has been My Geek Review. I'm CK Burch, and I'll see you next time.